So the next question is from Data. He would like to know what steps they will be taking to make the trip more feasible. Return trip as well. There are technologies we have that can be implemented that solve some of the supply issues like aquaponics and other renewable sources. Why have not we gone this route?
Not familiar with the latter part of what you what you mentioned, but there has been proposals to bring costs down. One of the key things that ultimately one of the most expensive things about space exploration is the propellant. I don't recall the numbers. It's like for every kilogram you need about 5 kilograms to lift it. 5 kilograms of propellant to lift it, if I recall correctly. And of course, the more propellant, the more money it costs. And so you think of one of the reasons why all these disposable rockets are so expensive really is because you're paying for a multi-million-dollar rocket, then you're paying for several hundreds of thousands of dollars for the propellant. And of course, the rocket is lost. It burns up in the atmosphere. It's thrown away. It's not used again. You have to buy another rocket. Okay, we'll do that again. Well, imagine a scenario in which you had you can buy a car. You can buy a car for about $20,000 Australian. I'm not sure what that is in American currency. That's probably about maybe $30,000 or $40,000. But anyways, you buy a car for $20,000. You fill up the tank for maybe maybe $50 or $100 or so. Okay. And so imagine a scenario where, okay, I've filled up the car with the petrol. I've driven the car. Oh no, I'm out of petrol. I got to buy a new car. No one would be able to afford to buy a car. No one would be able to afford to drive if that was the case. Or if you have an airplane, for example, a Boeing 747. Imagine if you had to throw away the 747 after you've run out of fuel and buy a new 747. No one would be able to afford to fly. So what Elon Musk has proposed to actually bring the cost down is he would return the rocket to the launch pad. Okay, then you would refuel the rocket, and so the rocket, a Falcon 9 rocket, would probably cost you about maybe $50 million, but the actual propellant would only cost in the range of about $200,000. So in the long run, what he's proposing is that it would bring costs down to Mars, is rather than using one rocket for each proposed flight to Mars, you would use the same rocket over and over again. In the end, all you really is paying for is just the propellant to refuel it. So that's what needs to be done in order to bring costs down. When the space agency took off in the 1960s, people of my mother's generation, they were thinking that by now we'd be living on the moon. We'd have cities on the moon. We'd have cities on Mars. We'd have visits to asteroids. We'd have visits to the moons of Jupiter. We'd have holidays in the space station. We'd have holidays on the moon for all we knew. That was the anticipation, but it never really took off. And really, it's just been disposable rockets from the way to go. And no one has. The space shuttle tried to be reusable, but in the end, it was just semi-salvageable, really, because the engines would break every now and then. You would need to refurbish the engine. You would need to refurbish tiles. You need to refurbish parts of it. Sometimes the booster engines would be lost at sea. In fact, one interesting bit of trivia with John Glenn's return flight on the space shuttle is that when the shuttle actually took off, it lost the protective cover for the drag chute, and so if you look at the video, you can actually see the video of the launch of the shuttle. You can actually see the protective cover for the chute actually falling off just before it launches off the pad. And so obviously their plan there was to if I recall correctly, was use a longer runway or something and various aerodynamic braking mechanisms to try and slow it down without the drag chute. But the point is that the shuttle was never really reusable as it was supposed to be and stuff. It just ended up being salvageable. And so with Elon Musk, what he's proposing is that the entire rocket is brought back. Nothing is thrown away. You even with the Dragon, you'll have a capsule that's reusable, that it uses its own engines to make propulsive landings. You just refuel it, and maybe obviously clean it up on the inside, of course, in the cabin and stuff, but nonetheless it's reusable in that way, you would constantly be refueling the tanks. So all you're really paying for is the propellant. You're not constantly buying new rockets, buying new spacecrafts over and over again. You're just paying for the fuel.
Let's go into the names of these rockets. Minion brought this up, saying Mr. Musk demonstrates a healthy sense of humor in the names he chooses for his equipment. Dragon capsule with a Raptor engine, or 52 Raptors to be precise. He even wishes the name the first Red Dragon craft, Heart of Gold, which was also the name of the stolen ship in A Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. The one that had on infinite improbability drive. Maybe this is a clue, and the probability of this happening is further away than we are led to believe.
I'm not familiar with the probability drive, although I do know that he did try teaming up with Dr. Chang Diaz at one stage, probably for his proposed Vasimir plasma rocket, which would use argon or hydrogen plasma, really, to accelerate the rocket to not near light speed, but basically to the point that would bring the trip to Mars down to only 30 days. That's being debated, but in regard to, yes, he does tend to have a sense of humor with naming the spacecrafts and his rockets and stuff. The Falcon line of rockets, they were named after the Millennium Falcon in Star Wars. He named the Dragon spacecraft after Puff the Magic Dragon. There's a myth that the song was based on drugs, and a lot of people thought he was on drugs when he was proposing this rocket, so he named it the Dragon. Obviously, the song itself isn't about drugs, but that's irrelevant right now. But the rocket, the gigantic rocket, originally was called the Falcon 20. It's been undergoing various names at this stage and stuff. At one stage, it was even called the BFR, if I recall correctly. That was named after the rocket in the video game Doom. What BFR stands for, some say it stands for Big Falcon Rocket. Musk himself jokingly called it the Big Fucking Rocket, for obvious reasons.
That's good. It's good to have humor in serious situations. I'm going to bring it home, bring it into, let's say, closer to Earth and the Van Allen belts here. Because it wasn't more, I can't remember the name of that test capsule that they shot close to the Van Allen belts to check shielding in itself. And it always strikes me funny how, not to beat a dead horse, but they've already presented that they could get through it. So I'm a little confused on why they keep testing their capabilities of even getting close, because I know the shuttle ran into some issues, didn't quite get as close as they predicted they would.
Yes, I believe the spacecraft that you're referring to was the Orion spacecraft. That was the proposed capsule for George Bush's Constellation program. Of course, that was cancelled, later resurrected by Obama, but in different destinations and whatnot. But what's really interesting, I find, about the Orion space capsule is that its shield is rated at 20 grams per square centimeter. That's the equivalent of 20 centimeters of water. And the Apollo capsule at its thickest point was rated at 8 grams per square centimeter. For those keeping score, the Dragon spacecraft is rated at about 2 grams per square centimeter. So you can do the calculations. The Dragon would only attenuate protons with energies up to about 2.5 mega electron volts. The Apollo capsule would attenuate about 8 mega electron volt protons, and the Orion spacecraft would attenuate protons with energies of about 12 or 15 mega electron volts. If I recall correctly, it's stuff. There's a chart in the book Astronautical Engineering and Science. J.W. Keller and his team, they have provided a chart showing what kind of attenuation different shieldings would offer, and so you can use that to get an idea of how much shielding you would need for these kinds of protons in the belts. But in the case of Orion, They predicted the what kind of shielding it would use. They have models for the Van Allen belt. The one that was commonly used was the AP8 and the AE8. AP8 is for protons, AE8 is for electrons. This was commonly used. In fact, it's commonly cited by propagandists as evidence that the astronauts could survive, but it has its flaws. It doesn't take into consideration the greater than 7 MeV protons, and the reason it stops at 7 MeV is not because of a lack of protons at energy. It's because the higher in energy these particles get, the more difficult they are to measure. So for every proton or electron at the high energy you're probably getting substantially more than that you don't detect, because the higher energy they pass through the detectors, they don't register well. You have to infer the higher energy protons from the background noises, from the bremsstrahlings, and from everything else, and you need a very large detector to measure the higher energy particles anyways. The one that they used for predicting what the Orion should encounter was the AEP9 models, the AEP9, the AE9 models, which is obviously the newer models, which replaces the AX8 models, and these are considered more reliable than the previous models. But even with these improved models for the Van Allen belt, the doses that they were predicting the Orion would encounter. Keep in mind the Orion has 20 grams per square centimeter of shielding. The doses that they encountered on the Orion were more equivalent to what the AP9 models were predicting for a shield rated at 10 grams per square centimeter. Okay, so keep in mind that the Orion actually had 20 grams per square centimeter, which indicated that there was substantially much more radiation than they were anticipating. Because the less the shield, the higher the rates will be, the higher the counts will be, the higher the detection will be. And so this thing turned out that the radiation it was being flown into was much higher than what they were anticipating. Okay, and so, well, this shield is much more dense than what the Apollo capsule had. So, well, what would they be receiving? It's going to be much higher than these models are predicting. This data from the Orion spacecraft clearly indicates the flaws with the models that they have been using. You've got to use the appropriate correction factors to try to find out what they would actually be absorbing, and so this just demonstrates how big of a hazard the Van Allen radiation belt is. So considering that they went in there with a prediction for 20 grams per square centimeter and it ended up being much higher, more comparable to what they were expecting for 10 grams per square centimeter, it shows that that the radiation hazard, they don't quite fully understand really what they're getting into in that Van Allen belt, which indicated that the Orion spacecraft proved that the radiation in the Van Allen belt was much higher than what they predicted they were going to be getting themselves into.
All right, perfect. I just have one last item I want to question about, and that's the moon dust and Mars dust. Being similar in composition, I'm assuming, or I've looked into it, seems pretty damn close. And the difficulties allegedly caused on the Apollo missions, the hardware, suits, gears. What I've read, it's like shards, and really grind up in gears, and it's just a mess. So I don't know if they've accounted for that in the habitats, if they do in fact make it to the moon or Mars.
Well, dust has always been a concern. In fact, even before the Apollo missions, there was concern that the spacecraft would sink in a pool of dust. That was, of course, before they had sent the Ranger missions there to detect it. Although they did have the British, they did have, I think it was the Australians. I can't remember if we did it or it was the British that did it, but we had microwave sensors of the lunar surface that showed the dust was relatively thin. But even so, there's always the concern that it will get into your instruments, it will get into the electronics, will cause problems for your vehicles, for your equipment there and stuff, and even concerns about tripping and cracking your helmet on the rocks, and potentially causing a breach of some kind, which is obviously a serious concern. In fact, a few years ago on the ISS, one astronaut had to call off Nevia early because he had signs of a tear in his suit glove. He had to retreat back to the capsule. It wasn't a serious breach, but it was a real concern. In regard to the duster being the same in composition as the Earth composition, that's very convenient. The Apollo samples, they had the same mineral, chemical, and isotopic composition as terrestrial basalts. Basalt is a mafic is the solidification of mafic magma, you know, and mafic meaning it contained dark minerals like olivine and pyroxenes and stuff like that. If it was felsic, it would have contained much more plagioclase, more quartz and stuff like that. But anyways, that's the point. Is they have the same composition. The Apollo rocks, they contain the same composition. Recently, the Chinese, they landed their Chang'e 3 lander on the surface of the moon. They released the data to the public on their Chinese Academy of Sciences website. I took the liberty of examining that data, and I found that their composition was about 40% calcium oxide, about another 40% titanium oxide, with only about 4% silicon dioxide, which is completely unlike anything we even postulate to exist. Well, anything that we know, I've never heard of a calcium-based igneous rock. This is just unheard of. The Chinese released their own report recently on the lunar cells, and they tried to say no, it's basalt, but it is different to what they have on Apollo. I had a read of their report. It seemed like they were trying to make 1 + 1 = 3, really, to be perfectly honest with you and stuff. But they still came open with that they felt it was different in composition to the Apollo samples.
I'm sorry to laugh. It's amazing, and the more visits to the moon and other missions from other countries, you know, we'll divulge more as time goes on, I assume. Not to mention the discovery of electric charges now, you know, when the dust flies over the craters, and not knowing what effects it would have on hardware astonishes me when they've already been there and communicated. But with that, we're almost to an end, and I'm not sure if you want to talk about anything else or bring something up that you're interested in. I'm not sure if anyone here would like to type a question and maybe to be answered, but I'll leave it to you to decide, Jarrah, and we'll go from there.
Well, ultimately, my main goal really is to solve the radiation hazard, really, and that's why I started the whole Moonfaker series, to get people aware of the hazard with trying to get to the moon, trying to get to Mars, so people can actually seriously solve the radiation hazard. I believe SpaceX has the technology to get us to the moon and to Mars for real. They're proposing a rocket that can lift 550 tons. That's more than enough to lift the required shelter. Of course, his proposals fall short, really, but hopefully with these proposals rectified, hopefully when he realizes a mistake, be it through revision of his data, through revision of his proposals, or learning the hard way from, I hate to say it, learning the hard way from a fatality due to space radiation, hopefully we can rectify these problems with these private space missions to Mars, private space mission proposals, rectify these problems and actually legitimately solve the radiation hazard and get people to the moon and Mars for real. That's my ultimate goal here.
Well, I'm going to have to back you on that. I have nothing against deep space travel, and actually wish it was available now, and it's not, due to situations as you research and present to others, and misleading facts, striving to find an answer to these dilemmas we are faced with. I want to thank you for coming in, and I had a great time. I hope everyone else enjoyed the chat tonight. If you have anything else to say, that's great. If not, thank you very much.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here, and I do have one thing to say. Stay tuned to my channel, White Jarrah, on YouTube. I get more common than anything else. I get comments, when's the next moonfaker? When's the next moonfaker? When's the next moonfaker? Stay tuned because your wish will be granted in a few hours.
Excellent, and I appreciate you sharing that with us. I've followed you for years, so I can't wait to see that. And again, I want to thank you for what you were doing, making people aware and presenting items that should be thought about. And I wish you the best, Jarrah.
Pleasure to be here. Nice to speak to you.